Hi, I'm Amy Cardoso and welcome to Art This Week. On this week's episode, we visit the Blanton Museum of Art, and our interviewer, Alexandra Robinson, speaks with curator Rosario Granados about their exhibition, Painted Cloth, Fashion and Ritual in Colonial Latin America. Now for Art This Week. Hi, I'm Alexandra Robinson at the Blanton Museum of Art, here to speak with Rosario Granados about the exhibition Painted Cloth. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure.
Sure. So now I have the first question. This is a beautiful exhibit, and it has a collection of objects and paintings, the exhibition design, and then also all the research in textiles. Can you talk a little bit about how all of this came together?
Well, it was a long process, but all started with my own personal fascination with one painting. One painting that includes the figure of the Virgin Mary and then a donor, Our Lady of Bethlehem and a donor. We don't know nothing about this man, we don't know who he is, but it's evident that he is making a statement, not just because he is portrayed there, no, but also on the way he's dressed. And you can say the same of that huge figure of Our Lady of Bethlehem. And by looking at that painting, I realized that we had a possibility to create an exhibition that would attract wider audiences in terms, and then I could address issues of technique, of how it looks the way it looks, but also this fascination with the representation of textiles. And when the project developed into what it is today, I decided to use the term fashion just because I knew it would be more attractive to wider audiences. So I wanted to create a show on colonial art, but something that could be at the same time or feel a little bit more universal. And there's nothing more universal than the way we dress and the statements and the things we say about ourselves than how we're dressing. You know? So I thought it was an opportunity to address the religious component of colonial art, but at the same time say something much more.
I want to jump to the last part of the exhibition, the one that you were just referring to, and talk about the idea of how the fashion and the different types of people that are represented in the images and for the objects exist. Can you talk a little bit about the globalization of this idea of fashion and how it represents itself in different castes of people?
Well, it was a very globalized society. You know, the 18th century was a moment where there was a lot of commercial trade going on all around the globe. You know? Not only Europe and the Americas, but with Asia and I would say even with Africa. You know? And I think fashion allowed for that or made evident that trade because the models, the designs were mainly French, but the materials most of the time were from Asia. And I'm thinking, of course, in silk. You know, all the taffetas used for the garments that we have in the show were made with Asian materials and with dyes that were also coming either from Asia or from the Americas, no, in the case of the cochineal. Yeah. And they were very valuable. No, the cardinals in Rome would use garments dyed with cochineal, and it was a symbol of status. No, and so I think the portraits that we have in this last section talk about that. You see the models, the designs of the garments are French, but you can see also how they were adopted or modified by people in the Americas. And so in this way, the garments are making a statement of how knowledgeable these people, wealthy people are, but also you can see them in how they were transformed by slaves of African descent, and were used on daily basis, and also how objects like lace, for instance, was attached to indigenous garments like the huipil or even the rebozos, which are not exactly indigenous, but they were popularized in or by indigenous women.
The example of the rebozo that you have on display is not something that would have been worn.
No, it was not worn like this,
right.
But it was more celebratory item. We know that it was not to be used because of the quality of the embroidery, and it's a depiction of El Paseo de Bucareli, which is one of the main avenues in Mexico City. And Ana Paulina Gámez, who is one of the authors in the catalog, claims that it served as a canvas to depict or talk about the pride of the wealthy nobility in Mexico City.
The exhibition is broken into segments, and at the beginning you have objects and paintings that represent textiles being constructed, whether they're spinning or samples. And I was curious to talk about why these objects were made, like the paintings themselves, or
because I think it is a testament of how important the makers of these objects were. Tailors came to the so-called New World very early after the Spanish invasion, and I think it is telling of how important having a local production of garments was. It was not only a way of keeping the invaders dressed, but also it was one of the easiest ways for enculturation. If you are trying to create a new society, you need to tell everybody how to dress. You have to not uniform them, but you need to encourage them to incorporate into this new culture, and you do it through religion, through politics, but also in the way people look. And one of the things that we explore in the exhibition is this attempt by the crown of regulating which kind of garments could be used by every sector of society. And of course, those were failed attempts, because it's not possible to encourage people to only wear what you were supposed to wear. Human nature is a bit rebellious, and you always want to go places where you are not supposed to go. And if you were to wear in a specific way, and then you could fool the system, and be seen as somebody else that was more advantageous for you, then you would do it. And I think that's the beauty of fashion. It's something that is external to you and presents who you are, but at the same time, you can fake who you are. You can pretend. And I think that's why the exhibition plays constantly with this idea of pretend. The painting that we have behind us, it's a painting of a sculpture that pretends to be the real object in the niche, or the altar where it was venerated. So it's always this game of pretend, of an alternative reality, and it was a fantastic way to be able to go on those two lines, of the pretend of fashion, but also of what art is in general. It's the creation of another reality, and I think that's where are those of the two main goals of the show, to make us reflect on how art is creating this other alternative reality.
Yeah. It's like the function of the red curtain,
the
right?
curtains,
like the one that we walk in
exactly
through when we come into the
and
show.
That's why we wanted to replicate those curtains, because the curtains that you are seeing behind us are curtains made to reveal a sacred image. And so by that I mean that we're used to see objects all the time, but back in the 18th century, of course, before as well, sacred objects were concealed. They were not, because they were sacred, were not supposed to be seen. And therefore, in special occasions when the curtains, the veils that were there concealing them were opened, then you could have access to that sacred artifact. And that's what these paintings are trying to make, to make you aware of the privilege you have that the image is accessible to you.
In some ways, that's exactly how the figures that are in the other image, similar to this one, they're embroidering like Catholic.
The chasuble.
Yes, the chasubles. And so they're equating themselves with the holy or with the divine.
And they are, even to this day, if you go to Latin America, even in Spain, it is a privilege to be chosen to be the one making these garments for these cult statues. So it's very much alive. It's a tradition that is very important, and I wanted to start there because of that importance of the makers, no? Because there is nothing if you don't recognize who made them. No, I didn't include any image of the painters, but they're also as relevant as the makers of the textile arts.
So one of the things that I find so fascinating that I would like for you to talk a little bit about, and you alluded to this, was this idea that paintings in the exhibition are representative of sculptural objects that would exist in niches that we wouldn't normally see on a day-to-day basis. But then you also have objects as sculpture, but that represent textile or embroidery. And then you have paintings of, like there's the cover, the frontispiece for the altar, where it's a representation of embroidery as a painting. So there's this funny space where things live and move. And can you talk a little bit about how that works?
I love your question, and I guess that's why the show is called Painted Cloth, right? Because I wanted to talk about this idea of what we just talked, art as being able to represent, but also to create reality, no? And this artifice, I think, is what is fascinating about art in general, but particularly of this, the art of this period, because everything tries to be something else. It's kind of the image of a mirror, but transcending the image of the mirror, or becoming the image in the mirror. So it's just fascinating, you know, and it's very complex. And for me, it's very similar to what modern art is trying to do. And I'm thinking in a lot of theory about what mimesis is, you know, Foucault and this idea that this is not a pipe, you know, and all those very theoretical understandings of how image work. But now we're seeing that through a religious painting, which normally is not the way that you would think of a religious painting. And that's exactly what I wanted, to create this space of reflection and say, this is art, and it's religious art, but it's so magical, it's so complex in what it's trying to do, that I think it's worth the attention. Because if you are dismissive to this art because it's religious, or because it wants to be European art, but it's not. And so the anatomical depiction of the body is not completely well, then you are losing a lot of very compelling conversations, no? And then it has many layers, and I think the metaphor of the textile world works perfectly fine for a complex reality as it was the colonial Latin America, no? Where you have so many things happening, so many peoples living together. So in a way, that complexity is encompassed on the title, on Painted Cloth, no? I really love that whenever people come and see this altar frontal that you were talking about, they all think it is a textile, but it's a painted version. And what I love is that we were able to transmit this artifice of the piece because of the setting. If you were to see this very same painting as we would do in an art museum just hanging by itself, you would not have the same reaction. So for us, it was very important to contextualize it and to make it regain this original setting, because then it came back to life. And for me, it was important. And in a way, also what we tried was to unfold the painting next to it. So you would see not only with this fake altar that we built for it, we were able to bring it back, but also with the painting, we're complementing all the ritual context that it was or would be around it at the time of its creation. And I think it is, I don't know if all visitors will get the feeling of this, an image being unfolded into the space, but I think that's one of the fantastic works of a curatorial experience. For me, it was very important to create an exhibition that would allow these objects to have a conversation without me or a docent explaining the relationship between the objects. So it was something that we worked very hard to achieve. And I think there are certain corners of the show where you can see this conversation happening. I'm really proud of that.
You include many paintings in the that focus on the importance and holiness of the cloth itself, and you talk about that with the altar frontispiece. But I also think another really interesting representation of that is the La Veronica, the Virgin de Guadalupe, and then the Ecstasy of Mary Magdalene that sort of like are all in a line. And the textile sort of functions in different ways. Can you talk a little bit about that in relationship to those images and the function of cloth in sort of Christianity or divinity? Or
I think one of the trends in art history now is materiality, and so that means that people are looking into how things were made. But for me also, I wanted to emphasize the way the material, the fabric, the cloth is represented, and in this idea of having a painted cloth, I wanted to emphasize the fabric, the materiality of something that you can touch and the symbolic value of that. And so those three and two other paintings that are on that section, the holiness of cloth, are about that. And in the catalog essay, I talk about how cloth has been always a sacred artifact. It's one of the most valuable relics. Because as if you don't have the body of a holy person, but you have what was attached to it. It's similar to what these paintings are trying to do. You touch them, and then you have the sacred aura of that person or that object, close to you. That's why there are so many relics of Mary, the mantle, the sash that she wore. And there's nothing more material in that way than the veil de Veronica, because that's the first image of the face of Christ, and according to the legend was imprinted on a piece of cloth, when on his way to Calvary. So from there, the iconography was very clear, that you have piece of fabric depicted, and it's one of the things in all our history you can find beautiful examples of that. I'm thinking in Zurbarán, which is really a fantastic trampantojo, this idea of that you feel the fabric, at Trompe-l'œil, as people also know it, and so from there it was fantastic to find another example that is very meaningful for the Americas, which is Our Lady of Guadalupe, one of the few images that instead of being a sculpture are painted. And so finding this other example where the cloth of this other holy imprint was very evident was fantastic. The fact that both of them are made by the same artist was also a fantastic, the result of my research. And then the other painting that you mentioned, the Ecstasy of Mary Magdalene, has been one of my favorite paintings in the world for a long time. I saw it when I was in graduate school. And so when this idea of the depiction of textiles came about, I knew I wanted that painting there because it's a very subtle, amazing depiction of a translucent veil that it's really an invitation to think about all the implications, and it makes you wonder. And I think art is amazing because of that. No, it fools you with questions, and it fools you with the answers. No, so I think it is it's a painting that you can just stay hours and finding little animals, little details, and just be wondered by the way this painter just was able to create a piece of cloth without depicting a piece of cloth, which I think is fabulous.
The embodiment of the entire exhibition is deep and wide, and you can also enjoy it on many levels. But I was curious what one of your favorite paintings was or objects was in the exhibition.
That's a very hard question because I love many of them, but because we mentioned already the Our Lady of Bethlehem, and we mentioned already the Magdalene, and we have here Our Lady of Forsaken, which are among those top 5. I want to focus now on a sculpture that depicts our, it's a Inmaculada, and it's a sculpture made in the Philippines with a very complex technique, which is, it's a cart or a core of wood that was covered by fabric that has been gessoed or immersed in plaster. Mm-hmm. And it tries to depict wood, but it's fabric. Mm. And it tries to be an estofado sculpture, which was very fancy and very expensive, and was made with gold and real wood. Yeah. So this is a painting, it's a sculpture that is replicating something else, but creating the effect of fabric, not to look fabric, but to look like wood. Yeah. And I think it's just wonderful. And the face and hands are made in ivory, and they're absolutely Asian. The facial features are completely Asian and very relaxed and beautiful. And that's the goal of the statue, to transmit this idea of peacefulness, to the viewer. But it's a fantastic piece of art. It's very complex, in terms of where was it made and how it was made. But when you are seeing it, you are not aware of that complexity. You just feel peaceful, and I love that combination.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to you for watching.
We want to thank Rosario for speaking with us. For more information on the exhibition, go to blantonmuseum.org. That's it for Art This Week. Thanks for watching. Find all of our videos and sign up for our newsletter at artthisweek.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter.